Good morning. Good morning, Christ City. Hey, y'all look fantastic. Excellent. Yeah, and Teen City, by the way, you all can be dismissed. How about that? How about that? That's good. I remembered this time. I've forgotten the last 37 times, but Justin reminded me back there, and I forgot, and then Ryan reminded me back there with like he was directing traffic, and I thank you for that. Go get him. Kiddos, my name is Matthew Watson. I serve as one of the pastors here at Christ City, and just want to lend my voice to the chorus that says, welcome to each and every one of you. I hope that you're enjoying the holiday weekend. Thank you for joining us. And for those of you that serve in the military or those who are remembering friends or family members who've passed away serving, I pray that this weekend you experience God's comfort as you remember their lives. I want to set the table a little bit for us this morning. We've already covered some ground in our liturgy, but if you've been tracking with us for the last few weeks or last few months, and this is going to be old news for you, but if this is just one of your first times or you're newer, you should know that Christ City is entering a unique season up ahead. As you've heard already, Jocelyn Henderson is stepping off of full-time staff and is charting a new vocational direction. I'm selfishly, let me own this, praying that the Lord keeps her in D.C. and at Christ City, but I also know that she's gifted in a multitude of ways, and I know that the Lord will guide her forward. Pastor Justin is like hours away from starting a long-needed, long-deserved 3-month sabbatical. We've got a staff retreat. I am completely sure my guy's going to mail it in for that. We're going to just roast marshmallows by the fire pit or whatever. We'll talk about stuff that's going to happen. He's going to be like, doesn't bother me, praying for you now. The Lord go with you. So he's got a sabbatical upcoming. He's going to do a fair bit of globe-trotting, but what's more is the soul work that he'll be doing, reconnecting more deeply with himself and with those that he loves and those who have shaped his life throughout his life and with the Lord. And if those two transitions weren't enough, Christ City is going to be dislocated from Minor Elementary School as it undergoes renovations this summer. Anybody else got anything? We just sort of pile on. Any other transitions or dislocations you might need to know about? Next week, by the way, actually marks our 11th year as a worshiping community, meeting in this very building. So to not meet here, pandemic notwithstanding, for a prolonged period of time, was really just like the icing on the summer of transition cupcake that's ahead of us. We've already shared about all that the summer will hold for us, how we'll gather for worship and community and mission, and all the events and all the spaces of ministry. We've shared sort of all the things. Go to the website. There's no need to rehash that here. Do make sure that you're following us on the social medias and sign up for the weekly newsletters and keep an eye out on the website. But all that together, all of these things kind of put together, it feels really like a liminal moment for us as a church. Liminal from the Latin word meaning a threshold, like what you would go through a door from one space to another. It's a time of transition when the future, though exciting, is unclear. Next week, we're going to start a new sermon series and a new devotional series that focuses on a section of the book of Psalms that are called Psalms of Ascent. It's chapters 120 through 134, and each of those psalms are songs that were sung by the people of God as they made their way towards Jerusalem and ascended the hills in Jerusalem, headed to the temple to worship. It was their playlist as they headed to worship. It was like their road trip music that they sung on the way to the temple. During the summer, starting next week, June through August, we're going to make our way through these psalms. We want to root ourselves in these psalms, these ancient scriptures, as we gather for worship differently, as we gather for community differently, and as we embody a unique mission that God has for each of us and all of us. As we together and separately pass through the threshold of these summer months, we want the words of the psalmists to be on our lips and on our ears and kneaded into our souls. We want the Spirit to guide us forward, just as we're praying for God's Spirit to guide Jocelyn into adventures yet unknown and Pastor Justin into a season of refreshment that will be good for the fungs and to the glory of God. The same Spirit guiding us all and guiding us together. That's what's up ahead. Now for today, I want to use this morning as kind of a prequel to the summer series and the summer spiritual journey. And I want, for maybe the remainder of our time this morning, I want to extend an invitation to all of us to consider how we want to journey through the season ahead. And consider how we might journey through the season ahead, as well as any season of life, as those who long to follow Jesus and to be shaped by him. Stated differently, I think the question that I want to kind of drop in the middle for us is, how does the Spirit want me and want us to show up and be shaped by this particular season of life? To quote Gandalf the Grey, what will you do with the time that is given to us? In the passage that we read earlier, we encounter the story of Abraham, one of the patriarchs of our faith, whose story is chronicled in the book of Genesis. And then it's retold and reflected on in the book of Hebrews. It's a story of someone who walks through their own journey and navigates their own liminal moments with the Lord. And with our time this morning, I want to simply kind of walk through that passage a bit and reflect with you on its intersection with us. And I want us to remember that the Lord is with us in all seasons of our lives. And because of that, it can shape each season of life that we find ourselves in. So I want to walk through this, not maybe less preaching and just kind of more reflecting with you about what this might mean for us as we look ahead. The book of Hebrews is a fascinating book. It's actually one of my favorites. Side note, I'm just going to tell you the side note. When Lisa and I first started dating, this was like we met in seminary, and she pursued me. I mean, it was just a little embarrassing early on, and finally I was like, okay. That's not exactly what happened, but anyway. One of the early, when we were dating, trying to sort through, like, okay, how do we want to do this? One of the things to do is a very seminary thing to do at the time, but still remains very meaningful for me. We would go through a book of the Bible together. We would, like, sort of in our quiet times, individual devotions, and then once a week we'd come together, we'd have breakfast, and we would say, here's what the scriptures are saying to me. Here's what I sense the Lord wants me to do in light of this. And the first book that we went through together was Hebrews. It continues to shape me today. So I love this book, one of my favorites. So I say that to say that's why I've come back to this book, as I feel like we're facing a new season ahead. We don't know who the author of Hebrews is. Many suspect it was a disciple of Paul, but we're not entirely sure. The author is writing to a particular group of believers who have experienced a great deal of persecution, a great deal of tragedy. They've been imprisoned, they've lost their property, they've experienced violence, and they've come through all of this, but their faith is the worse for wear. And they've begun to wonder if it's actually worth it. If following in the ways of Jesus is really worth the struggle, is really worth the pain, is really worth the disappointment. They are weary from the road that they have been on. And it's on the backside of that violence and persecution that the author writes a letter to the Hebrews. And what the author wants to assure the readers is that Jesus is enough. Throughout the letter, the author posits that Jesus is better than any other thing to which we might turn. We can tell from the letter that the intended audience is a Jewish audience, Jewish by background and faith and ethnicity. So too is the author. And over, the author is reminding and explaining and elaborating on the brilliance and the beauty and the trustworthiness of Jesus. The writer pulls on all of these stories of faith in the Old Testament, lifts them up and celebrates them, yet also shows how Jesus is better than them, how Jesus is better than the prophets, because Jesus moves forward the work of salvation, not just speaking about it. That Jesus is better than Moses because Jesus leads to a deeper liberation, is better than the priests because Jesus doesn't just offer a sacrifice of forgiveness, but is the sacrifice that offers salvation and overcomes death himself. At each turn, celebrating what has come and also lifting up what is in Jesus over and over. The author invites the reader to remember the life and death and resurrection and teachings of Jesus, and how that story and how that truth can hold us and sustain us through any journey that we find ourselves in, no matter how hard or how long or how wearisome the journey. That's the background of what's going on in the book of Hebrews, and when we get to chapter 11, beginning in verse 8, where the author picks up another of these key stories of the faith, The story of Abraham that's originally told in Genesis, the story of Abraham being called by God to leave the land of Ur and to make his way to the promised land. Hebrews reflects on Abraham's story this way in verse 8. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. Verse 8 begins by noting that Abraham was called to a place that he would later receive. What's hidden in the background of verse 8 is Genesis chapter 12. It's a pivotal story in the Bible when God comes to Abraham, whose name is Abram at the time. It would later be changed to Abraham. And he sends him out of the familiar place that he'd grown up and is launched into a journey that God would give him the details later as he went. We can peek into Genesis 12, verse 1. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's house to the land I'll show you." The story opens up, and the Lord just kind of rocks up into Abraham's world and is like, hey, listen, I want you to leave here. I want you to leave all that you've known. I want you to leave the place that you've grown up in, the place that's familiar to you, the place that your family has been for generations. I want you to leave that. I want you to leave all that's comfortable and convenient, a situation where you kind of know your place around, where you're feared and respected by others. I want you to leave all of that, and I just want you to go. To which Abraham replies, as many of us would, well, go where? And he's like, I'll tell you later. And the scriptures say that Abraham was like, all right, bet, and just took off. Now, listen, I was trying to think about this. Who are the people in my life where if I just went up to them and was like, hey, Drew, come with me, they wouldn't be like, where? That would be like a normal, like, man, I got to tell you, it has been like years of parenting where I can go in my kid's room and just be like, hey, boys, come with me. And they, you know, yes, Father, and like line up at the door and like just, no, they're like, okay, don't move. And they're like, where are we going? Like immediately. That's the question. I don't know anybody. I'm trying to think, like, Lord, is there someone? What am I doing wrong in my relationships that I can't get somebody just be like, come with me? And they're like, all right, cool. And then like, you know, hours into the journey, they're like, hey, by the way, where are we going? How long? Like, that wasn't Abram. That wasn't Abraham. God would go on to tell Abraham that the purpose of this journey was so that he would experience a unique blessing from God and be a blessing to others. The blessings would be for him, and that God would use this journey in Abraham's life to be a blessing to others. The dialogue between God and Abraham, it goes like this in Genesis 12. I will bless you, and you will be a blessing, verse 2. And all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you, verse 3. The reason for the journey, the reason for the dislocation and disruption, the reason for this liminal moment in Abraham's life, this invitation to cross this threshold moment ultimately was because God wanted to do something in Abraham, for Abraham, and through him. God wanted to bless him. He wanted Abraham to have a unique experience of God's kingdom in this life, in his life, and then to share that experience with others. But that was the blessing. To taste of God's rule and reign in his life, to experience God's freedom and healing, to get a sense of God's kingdom, but to not just hold that for himself, but to let that go through him and be a blessing to others so that others could likewise experience God's healing and liberation and freedom and salvation and restoration. That's what was the purpose of the journey. Friends, my sense is that this season that God has for us in the months ahead, this dislocation that we are facing, this forward movement down a road that goes who knows where, is so that we might have an expansive experience of God's kingdom collectively in a shared way and individually in an intimate way. That we might have an expansive and deepening experience of God's kingdom. And also, so that we might steward this season for the well-being of others, for the shalom of our neighbors. It's not just for us. But it's not just about Christ City. I know so many of you, just even as I look around and knowing your stories, and knowing kind of what you're facing and having a little bit of a peek of the season that so many of you are in, I know that so many of you find yourselves in a personal liminal moment. You feel like you too are being dislocated in some way, either by choice or chance or circumstance. And you're having to step away from the land of the familiar and the comfortable and the convenient to a place that, well, who knows where this goes? You're having to lay something down or lay it aside, or someone or some hope or some dream or some pursuit or some preference or some situation or some geography. It feels like you're having to launch down a road and you just aren't sure where it goes, but you sense God beckoning you forward. Saints, I want you to know that journeys with God are never meaningless. They are not aimless side missions. They are not time wasters or idle quests. They are invitations to God's blessing and to be a blessing by God's grace to others. The thing is, though, and we've referenced this already, Abraham, he didn't know where he was being called to go. He didn't have a final destination to put in the GPS. It didn't. It's just starting point. He's here, home, finishing point. I'll let you know. Look again at verse 8. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as an inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Abraham went, even though he didn't know. Now, listen, look. I've shared this before. I'm an Enneagram 7, which means, anybody? Am I alone? What's up? Where my party people at? That's what's up. Life of the party's right here. You got a summer cookout? Take note of who raised their hands. You want us there. Which means the thing, I like new things. I absolutely enjoy spontaneity. And to be honest with you, when I'm on a road trip, though, there are two things that I hate. Number one, not having the directions. And number two, having somebody else tell me the directions. Don't like it. No, not for me. I don't like heading out not knowing where to go or how to get there. It frustrates me so much to not know what the way is before I get out there and get going. But I have this problem because I don't like people telling me directions when I'm driving. I don't want to hear which way you want to go. I'm going to go my way. I'll figure it out. Eventually, world is round. I can't fall off. Cities are like squares and grids, sort of, except for state streets. Who knows where they go? I'll figure this thing out. Don't talk to me. The reason I don't like people telling me where to go is seed number one, because I don't like not knowing the directions. The other day, Lisa and I, we got into a bit of a conversation about this very thing. She had a colleague in town, and we were going to take the colleague to David and Leah's house. We're at the office. David and Leah literally live 5 blocks from the office. They have lived there for 8 years, 6 years, forever. I don't know, as long as I've known them. They have only lived in that place. I know how to get to their house. We get in the car. I'm telling you, this is my story. I'm going to tell it. I'm telling you, we get in the car. We get in the car on Wiley. I turn left. Wiley is 35 yards long. That's how and then I turn left. Lisa goes, "Oh, you're going that way?" Wiley's a one-way street. Immediately, I'm like, "What do you mean?" In a judgy way. "Oh, you're going this way?" I've made one turn 12 seconds into the drive. I know where I'm going. What I really hate about this scenario is when I don't know where I'm going. That's when the unsaved version of Pastor Watson shows up, and I'm impatient, and I'm short-tempered, and I get a little spicy. Yet Abraham, when he's faced with, that scenario of God's invitation to journey forward, he goes. Even though he doesn't know what's up ahead, he channels his inner, Elsa from Frozen 2, and he just heads off into the unknown. conversation I had recently with my friend and spiritual director, Dr. Randy White. We were talking about life journeys and how all of them are unknown because this is the first time any of us have been on the planet and been in this season of life. Randy said to me, he said, Matthew, life is a series of explorations, and all leavings are gateways to the next adventure. You can't move ahead until you leave the familiar and the known. That's where we begin to know God anew. It's in the uncertainty of the journey that gives the opportunity to bind to the Lord and to discover again that God is a trustworthy God. It is then that we are able to understand the faith of Abraham and the God of Abraham who, as he followed the Lord, even though he didn't know where the road would take him. It's in the unknown road that we're able to understand the liberation that Moses wrought when he fled Egypt and freed the slaves. But he didn't head out the short way home. He took a different, less known path because that's the way that the Spirit of God led them. It's the unknown road. It's in the unknown road that we're able to understand the hope of the wise men, the Magi. They didn't know where they were going, yet they just kept following because they longed to worship the new king that they knew would offer healing and salvation. Friends, it's okay if you don't know where you're going in the season of life. It's okay. If you are unsure where the path is taking you, if that's you, I want you to know, first off, you're among company in this room. And also, you are among holy company in our faith. You are among those that understand and may well be on a similar path, and that you are not alone. The Lord is with you and guides you, even when we can't see it forward. The Lord is your light, your salvation, your rock, and your guide. As the psalmist says in Psalm 121, the Lord watches over you. He watches over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Verse 9 continues the summary of Abraham's journey. By faith, he made his home in the promised land, just like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him in the same promise. Hebrews says that Abraham, he lived like a stranger in the land. He lived like a traveler in a foreign country. He lived in tents. This word in Greek, it's the same word as tabernacle. It's the same word used to describe the dwelling place of the Lord prior to the building of the temple. It was in a tabernacle. It was in a tent, in a mobile dwelling that the people worshipped as they wandered. I think they had a pipe and drape team too, so if you want to serve on the stage crew. The word the old King James uses here is the word sojourner. Abraham sojourned in the land. Sojourn simply means to live as a temporary resident. Abraham understood that wherever he went, it wasn't a final destination. He was on a journey with the Lord. The thing is, when you find yourself on a journey like that, it can shape your approach to how you live in a place. If you're trying to be thoughtful and deliberate and not just sort of trash some spot, if you're trying to be thoughtful and considerate and intentional about the journey, sojourners, they travel light. There was a season of our life when our oldest son was 1, and we lived in, I think, 16 different places over a 9-month period. We were dislocated. It was a period of homelessness for us. It was hard. We bounced around from one community to another. It's a challenge. When you live like that, you can't take everything with you. You have to make some decisions about what's going to help you on the journey or in the season that is ahead. Some things are better left behind. Some things are only meant for one place or one season of life and then are best left in the past in order to make way for what's up ahead. And at this point, I'm not talking about luggage. I turned 50 later this year. In the Watsons, we've celebrated a decade in D.C. last year. It's the longest we've ever lived in one place as a family. And over the past few seasons, I've been doing a lot of thinking and praying about what I want the next several seasons to look like in my life and ministry, and what I want, my neighboring and my neighborhood to look like. I've been working with spiritual director and asking questions about what from my past and previous seasons should I steward into the future here in D.C. And what one should I give thanks for, but which one should I leave in the past? I want to continue to remain in this place with you. I'm not going anywhere. We got a summer to sort through. But I want to be faithful in this place and recognize that I'm in a new season. And so there may be some new times, but there are times where there are new skills and new perspectives that are needed. I was thinking about this. When I first moved here, one of the things that I did with the kids was I rented one of those, the paddle boats. I don't mean like the stand-up paddle boat. I know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the paddle boats that you sit in that you can rent at the tidal basin. You know what I'm saying? You got me? So I rented one of those with the kids when we first moved here. And it was great until it wasn't. I'm with the boys, Nathan and Lass, and we're paddling out. You sit down, you kind of paddle with your feet. Anybody has ever done this? You done that? You done the tourist things? Perfect. All right. So we're paddling, and like we're just going like gangbusters. We get at the dock, we rent the thing, and then we just go out. Well, let's go to you can go to the Jefferson across the way. So we go over there, and they're like, all right, cool. And they're little. It's like 10 years ago, so they're smaller now. And I'm like, all right, let's head back. We start doing the paddleboard, like we're coming back, and all of a sudden it gets windy. And those boats, bro, like the wind is like, oh, want to go back to the dock? Bet. And they're pushing, and we can't make it. And so we're going so slowly. And at one point, Elias is so tired that he's like, I can't, my legs, I can't. He like stands up in the boat and like flips around to where he's now upside down, and he starts trying to do it with his hand. With his like 5-year-old hands. Like that's going to get us across the tidal basin. I'm like, bro, I don't think that's it, man. So eventually we make it back, but we are exhausted. I'm not paddle boating anymore, y'all. Recently, my man Dan, he took me sailing. Before he got out, he said we sat down at the picnic table, and he was ready. He had a clipboard, like graph paper or something, and like a Sharpie. He's like, I need to explain to you the physics of sailing before I let you on my boat. I was like, yes, all right, Captain. And so we sat down. Told me the science behind it, and he took me out. I still got a lot to learn. And Dan's a man to teach me. But these days, I'm learning how to harness the wind to take me to a destination. Sure, when I was younger, I would get, to new shores by grit and sweat and determination, but I get tired easy. And I'm in a different season now, but I'm still boating. Just differently, leaving some ways behind and picking up new ways, still traveling, just differently. Sojourners in the better parts, they know that there is joy in the journey too. They learn to savor the moments, especially the mundane ones. Tent dwellers understand that there's beauty in the everyday. And even on the days that feel like fear, there are reminders that God remains at the helm and at the ready to deliver us beauty amidst the chaos and uncertainty. Sojourners resonate with the words of author and poet Wendell Berry, who, writing about his own journey, says, when despair for the world grows in me, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests. In his beauty on the water, the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. I think we only get to that place of joy in the journey when we're able to see that God is still working for our good and in the good of others with each step we take. Jesus was a sojourner, was he not? Lived as a tent dweller, dwelling as a foreigner in a foreign land, and as such, he can identify with us when we find ourselves in seasons of dislocation. Luke's gospel, Jesus notes, foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. Saints, in those seasons where you or we aren't quite sure, or we're just not where we'd hoped we would be at this point, remember that you too are in holy company. And there is still blessing that God has for you there. To quote Annie Dillard, give in this world that we have, our task is to notice it. Given this journey we're all on, there are blessings that God has in store. And our task is to notice them. I guess just to conclude, so in verse 10, Hebrews says this, for he, Abraham, was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and whose builder is God. Abraham's journey, it did have a destination. There was an end point. Sometimes when we read this passage, I think some folks can often read it with the thought that sort of what Abraham was looking for was like heaven, sort of eternal life, heavenly city that awaits the end of life or the end of time. And that is a true reading. But it is also true that God has something for us here and now. The journeys that we're on, they aren't meant for us to arrive at some sweet by and by, but rather the journey and all journeys, this season and all seasons, are intended for us to experience in increasing measure a sense of the inbreaking of God's kingdom, the new city, the new community that God is forming in us and through us. This is why our journeys must include our own flourishing, but also the flourishing of others. It's why the journey that we are on is to be a blessing to us, but also a blessing to those that are around us. God wants us to participate in the building of that city that Abraham ached for, to participate in the coming of his kingdom on earth as it is in the heavenly city that is to come. The hard thing about this part, though, the hard part is that you might not be able to see it to completion here. Our piece of the journey might only be a part, much like what we were reminded of a few weeks ago from our panelists during our previous sermon series. We are a part of the solution, but we are not the solution. But as we journey into a new season with the Lord, let us be those that notice the ways that God is inviting us into deeper communion with Him, and let us be those that journey in a way that bless others around us. I think it's like this, or it's like this for me. Behind our house, we've got a community garden in our neighborhood, and it's just out kind of our back door. And we've been gardening there for, I don't know, the 8 or 9 years that we've lived in that house. We have a plot in the community garden. Last year, I planted peppers and cucumbers and tomatoes because Lisa makes amazing salsa, and so I offered those up. Things have gotten a little bit hectic around the Watson house. We got a kid graduating from high school, go Nathan. He said yes to Temple University, go Owls. Good for him. So when the spring rolled around, they asked us if we want to renew our plot, and we didn't. I felt sad about it. I thought about it, kind of hemmed and hawed, but I had stuff going on. I couldn't get to it. The truth is, I didn't have the time to get the plot ready like I did last year and the 8 years before that. Things have kind of slowed down for me now, and so I kind of hoped that maybe they hadn't given my plot away. So last weekend, I headed out, went back to the garden, and over to my plot, and sure enough, somebody else had planted there. They've planted tomatoes just like me. But they put them in different spots, which is probably good, because my tomatoes didn't get enough sun, so good of them. I noticed that they're using my T-posts that I used to hold up my cucumbers. They set them up so that the tomatoes would grow on them. That's a good move, too. The bed was good and weeded. I wondered if they pulled up the wild onions that are on the west end of the bed. They smell nice when they come up. There's also garlic that I buried there. I buried it really deep. They might not have gotten it out, so if it pops up, it'll be a nice surprise for them. I don't know which neighbor's gardening there now, but I prayed for them. I prayed for their garden. I prayed that the work that I put into it over the years, replacing the soil and tending to the land, I prayed that it would yield them a good harvest. And that spot of ground that has brought me joy, I pray it brings them joy. And it still brings me joy, even as I wait and watch to see what comes up from it. I think that's what it means for us to sojourn, to journey with God in a way that keeps us alert to God's blessings that are all around us, and to journey in a manner that ensures that we are Christ-like blessings to others. I think this is how we look and labor for the city whose foundations, whose architect and builder is God, for our good and to God's glory. Can't wait to see what's up ahead for us. I can't wait to go there with you. Let me pray for us.